The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
100 games.
100, the big one double bagel.
Double bagel.
Yeah.
I guess it's got to be something positive, right? Because goose egg is like a bad zero.
Yeah, you don't want big giant goose egg. And I thought like donuts, but I'm trying to eat healthier.
That's fair.
Maybe a one double bagel, get some schmear, like
not too much though. It's not healthy.
No, it's not good for you, and that's the thing is it's got to be, it can't be like part of a balanced breakfast because you don't want to down like 700 calories before you even like walk out of the thing. Or, like just suddenly like eat a whole bunch before you do 100 episodes. No, you got to stay lean. You got to stay hungry. That's how we got through 100. We wanted it.
Yeah. We needed money from supporters to buy food.
Oh God, I'm so hungry.
So this is very on brand that we're starting just totally off theme to thank people for what we did. What did we do? Not what game did we play? What did we accomplish? What are we celebrating?
100 games. So that means that we've now been doing this for approximately 2.5 years.
Pretty good.
2.7.
Yeah, something like that.
2.73.
Yeah.
4. You're not going to check.
I'm not. Someone listening might. I'm not going to.
No, but if they do, they should go and check and they should leave it as a comment, which brings us to the fact that
we've been talking about this for a while. It's like, when did we want to, really publicly and loudly like thank people for Apple Podcast reviews, comments left on Twitter, comments left on Patreon, people who come into the Twitch stream and talk. And I thought like now's probably as good a time as any to do that, right? Because, you and I are first and foremost, sorry listeners, but like we're here for each other, right?
Yeah.
We really love doing this. You have a family and a stressful job. I have a family and a stressful job, but like we make time to do this every other week. And then, we get to share it with people. And I'm really thankful people like give a single crap about that. It's really amazing to me every time I look and I'm like, oh, people listen. Some of them come and talk to us. Some of them give us money. Like it's really, humbling, I think, like that this thing we do just kind of because you and I really enjoy it, that other people are like, I also too really enjoy this. And so going through some Apple Podcast reviews, which you should go leave if you haven't ever done that. Some Twitter comments, some comments that we've gotten on Patreon and on Twitch. Like I thought we should share some that we really liked from that list. So we're not going to count these down. They're not in any particular order. But I wanted to start with this one because this is not going to all just be glowing praise. So somebody left this after we did the Mortal Kombat 2.
I knew you were going to do the Mortal Kombat one. When you said it wasn't glowing praise, I'm like, it's got to be the Mortal Kombat one.
Because it's so funny. So this is their entire comment. This is 100% of what this person wrote. The game is much more fun on the arcade machine. Don't fart on it if you haven't played the real version. Otherwise, it's a great podcast. and I genuinely appreciate that feedback because not only is that a totally true comment, someone I know who listens like really intermittently and he just jumps around and like finds different games. He just texted me literally yesterday and was like, wow, the experience of Mortal Kombat on a console is really different than it is on the arcade machine, which is how I played it. And I was like, God damn it, this is going to haunt us forever.
Yeah, no, it's going to just, it's the gift that keeps on giving. No, I like it too, because it the person wanted to say, hey, just so you know, you were wrong about this. Otherwise it's pretty good. It's fine. Again, good, honest review. One of the ones that I particularly like is they're recommending what episode to start with, and they say start with Dr. Mario because everything you need to know about project management you learn in Dr. Mario, which I really appreciate because that was one of those, like, I think maybe once every 6 episodes or maybe every 10 episodes, I have like this like weird, in my mind, like this weird kind of like seeing through the looking glass of like, oh, this is what this really is. Like in the Jekyll and Hyde episode where I realized that the Jekyll and Hyde was like the potion, or in Dr. Mario where I had this realization of like, this is basically what I do for a living. Or for example, in Civilization 6, where I realized the reason why I like to come home and play Civilization 6 on easy mode is because that's what I do for a living. I just get to win every time this time, So I was really always very proud of that. And I was like, if I ever have to hold this up as a professional thing that I do, I'm going to point them to that episode. So the fact that somebody else saw that and thought the same thing, that makes me happy. I like it.
Yeah. And I do really appreciate the craziest tangents we go on that we then solidly tie back, because it makes us look like geniuses. Right. It's all nonsense we're making up on the fly. Way shocking. Everybody thinks we joke about like, oh yeah, we don't really do research. It's just, no, really. Like we play the game as is. We each have notes that we don't see each other's notes. Right. So I don't know what you're going to talk about. You don't know what I'm going to talk about. And then a miracle happens and and a podcast is born. Like it's, so when something that well thought out and coherent falls out of that seemingly random process, it's just you love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. My other big favorite one is just the it's a fairly long one. First of all, the guy, the title of the comment is Brock Strongo, which is I mean, that's a deep cut, man. Like that's a reference that we made forever ago, right? But he goes, it's very, very amazing praise where he says, George and Lines are two awesome dudes. Love listening to you guys. Lines is awesome. And at the very end of it, he goes, wait a minute. His name is Lions? I've been calling him Lines this whole time. Why didn't anyone tell me? Oh my God, I've been making an idiot of myself, which is just an amazing Simpsons quote. And I think about that probably once a month, about 10 times a year. I think about that quote and now by extension, this review, which makes me very happy.
Yeah. It's neurons that wire together, right? So like that Simpsons reference is now a little bit stronger because you also have the podcast link there. I am going to read a few that are just flat out glowing praise just because like these really genuinely make me feel good. Like we always say, like, oh yeah, we love to hear from people, but like that's true, right? Like,
oh yeah,
we pay for this out of our own pockets. Like we're not turning a profit off of this. Like, so hearing from people that they are getting enjoyment out of it, like it really does feel good. So here's a quote from one of them. This truly is the best podcast I've ever listened to, which I don't know if we're the only podcast that person's ever listened to. Frankly, I don't care if we're number one in a one horse race. It's just a really nice thing to say. This one is this came in recently and it gives me a chuckle just looking at it in my notes. Hands down, one of my favorite podcasts. You guys are really amazing at talking about this stuff with some of the most insightful, thoughtful, deep in the weeds takes on video games I hear or read anywhere. I've never really considered things like cycle times or sound as UI, so thanks for doing what y'all do, even if you kind of ruined games for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's kind of like improper kerning, where it's like when someone points it out to you, you're like, "Oh, thanks, dipshit." Where it's like, I'm not sure I needed that in my life, and it is definitely one of those things where once you start to break apart games, and as people listen to you, as they can do it as well, it's just kind of like, "Oh yeah, that's why I don't like this game." Darn it. I probably could have liked this game if not for knowing that this is a problem,
One more of these reviews that I wanted to specifically call out. Do you have any other thanks or praise you want to give?
Yeah, again, they're all nice. For me, it's I really do enjoy feedback kind of in general, just because when somebody, even at work, when I'm like, hey, how am I doing? Am I doing a good job? Am I doing a bad job? What could I be doing better? So, occasionally getting to log on and seeing just kind of somebody who listens to us, as you said, just the fact that people are listening at all is nothing short of, like this amazing, miracle-esque thing that I really appreciate. That somebody took, 5 minutes out of their day to be like, hey, I'm going to leave a comment for you. It's like reading, it hits the same thing emotionally for me as reading notes in a yearbook, Like if
That's
it
an
feels
excellent comparison.
So, every so often when I get to open up this yearbook and be like, oh, there's a new note in here. It's really a great feeling. So I have none others I specifically want to call out except for all of them. I love them all.
So this is actually a really long review that this person painstakingly left. But I just want to read the end part of their review, which is, whether they're tearing apart a slapdash Game Boy game or rightfully praising a SNES classic, they're always funny, insightful, and enthusiastic. I hope more people discover them. They are podcast treasure. They hold up. And you might have even heard me get a little choked up. Like, the question we ask at the end of every episode, if you're new here and wondering why the hell we're doing this, is does this game hold up? Right? Like, on the replay, did the game hold up? And so to have somebody use my own words against me, it's just man, it cuts deep, but it's like a Cupid arrow, not like a knife wound.
Absolutely. But we're all scientists here, so we should actually test that, to see if we hold up.
I see where you're going with this.
Any time I can use on-air time to forward the agenda of things we've talked about off the air, it's so inappropriate and delightful. It's like having an argument with your spouse and then bringing the child into the room so you can to be like, I'd love to bring a dog home. I want a dog. Well, I don't want a dog. Hang on, let's bring Timmy into the room. Timmy, I'm just saying I want a dog, but Mama doesn't want a dog. I'm just throwing it out there. So anyways,
I want a dog, and Mama recently said, and I'm paraphrasing here, she doesn't want you to be happy.
I mean, that was the bottom line. I forgot kind of what the middle ground was on that, but yeah.
But I am, so we've rambled on now, but I want to genuinely thank every listener, everybody who leaves a review, everybody who talks to us on Twitter. You even joined Twitter so you could see the praise firsthand, because you weren't there in the start. Everyone who supports us on Patreon, everybody who comes and watches me play games on Twitch, and conversations I've gotten to have with people. People who've shed light on stuff I then talked about on the show. I came up with it on my own. I really appreciate every single person. So what I'm looking forward to the most is the next 100 games where I get to say, hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
It's going good. It's been a week of, let's not talk about what's going on this week, because these are evergreen episodes and we never have to think about what's happening this first week in November ever again.
Yep. First week in November, 2020, nothing too big going on. And that's the thing, is that, the nice thing is we can now go back and listen to this episode at a different point in time and just close our eyes and think about a time when missiles were screaming towards population centers and how much nicer that is.
Yay. So what did we play?
We played Ender's Game. No, wait, Missile Command.
Close enough. It's actually closer than you think, but we'll get to that. So we played Missile Command for the Atari 2600, which
yes.
I'm pretty confident that as of recording, this is our first Atari game.
Yes.
Yeah. We've played other arcade ports, and this is no question an arcade port, but this is the first one I think we played for the Atari.
Yes. Eventually we'll have to play E.T. I mean, as game reviewers, it's incumbent upon us to do so, but that today is not that day.
It is not that day. So this game hit the Atari 2600 in 1981. There's actually a really weird, significant difference between the arcade version and the home version, which is the home version in the manual. There's an explanation, right? So you just walk up to the arcade cabinet and there's just, missiles painted on the side of the cabinet. But then in the manual for the Atari 2600 version, you are like the Flargans and you're being invaded by the anti-Flargans, right? So it's not humans versus other humans or aliens versus humans. It's aliens versus other aliens, which I think is actually a pretty smart decision, because they were like, let's not make this about us invading alien planets or alien invading Earth. Let's just totally separate that out, or
not make it about the Cold War.
Well, yeah, right? I mean, this is Cold War simulator basically, but it's I think it was actually pretty clever of them to say, like, if we're going to put some window dressing on this, let's just remove humans from the equation entirely.
Which is a wise decision because, like you said, as it becomes it to me, that kind of, and we'll get into it as we get into the game, but that still somewhat preserves the overall theme of the game, because if it was aliens versus humans or humans versus aliens, that would really push the idea of the other. Whereas if it's aliens versus aliens or humans versus humans, which is my understanding what the original designer intended, that really kind of drives home the idea of like of the theme of the game, But yes, so game is really old. I think this would be the oldest game we played. No, we played one from like the 70s. Which one was that?
It might have been the version of Oregon Trail we played.
Yeah,
actually, the version of Oregon Trail we played was probably not the one from the 70s, but I think the original Oregon Trail goes back to like 79 or 78.
Yeah, but this is definitely in the top 5 oldest games we played for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it technically, again, like we played the Atari version, the arcade version is older than that, right? So like this is still one of the oldest versions. Like no matter how you're choosing to measure this, game is old. It's old.
Yeah.
You surely have a nostalgia experience for this.
Oh, I do have a nostalgia experience for this. Actually, so I definitely played this in an arcade cabinet a couple of times. I don't really remember that very well. What I do remember is seeing a bunch of different reviews of this game about 5 years ago, where they were kind of like talking about, what makes Missile Command significant as a game. And so then about 5 years ago, I went back and replayed it, replayed it a bit. And I was like, ooh, no, this is a really good game. So that's why when you suggested what should we play for our 100th, I was like, I want to play this game because I really want to sit down and pick it apart because it's interesting. It's a really interesting game given what they did with how little they had.
Yeah, how little is not overstating it. So for me, the thing that I actually remember most about this game is the arcade cabinet, because one of the few things I really like about arcades compared to home consoles or PC gaming, unless you're rich, which I'm not, is arcade cabinets often, especially at this time in history, they often had purpose-built controls, right? And like nowadays, there's, a million stupid mobile phone games that they make into giant arcade games. And like it's just a touch screen or there's just big push buttons. It's not really that interesting. But the arcade cabinet for Missile Command looks like the command console to launch missiles. It has this crazy rollerball that you control the cursor with. There's, the like these giant buttons to like mash on. The HUD actually spills out onto the console. So like the city names that light up are actually on the console as well as on the screen. Like you don't get that with an Atari or a Nintendo or an Xbox. Like the game lives inside the TV, which is fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. But for some reason, this arcade cabinet just stood out I think it's the crazy rollerball, honestly. But like,
yeah,
this game just stands out in my mind. And weirdly, and I didn't bother to check with my parents on this because I decided I just want to live the lie. I think we may have actually had this game on an original Atari in my house when I was a kid. So we played the Atari 2600 version for the episode, which I have played before, but I think I literally actually played this in my home as a child.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, no, it's that's interesting. So now visuals?
No, not yet.
Oh.
I'm just not going to let you have it. So despite the, super,
I wasn't sure if we were going to shill because,
but here's why we have to shill, right? We have to shill because shilling is what you do. No, we have to shill because,
because we have to shill the verb because you are a shill, the noun.
Exactly. English is fun. No, because we thanked people and we can never thank them enough, but one of the things that we changed in celebration for the 100th game was we we like revamped Patreon. And so there's different things you can do now that get you like different rewards. There are stickers you can now get if you want to just buy them with money, or if you want to be a Patreon of a certain support level. But 2 of the support levels will get your name shouted out on an episode. And so we now, as long as we have some people to thank, we have to call out our 16-bit hero, Jacob. So thank you for being one of our 16-bit heroes.
Thank you, Jacob. Absolutely. We really appreciate it. I mean, like I'm just the talent. Lions puts a lot of time, energy, and effort into mixing all this sort of stuff. And I know that your support absolutely helps him. So that way you guys can hear my beautiful voice and hear all of my salient thoughts as Lions does all the troll grunt work behind the scenes.
It's true. I'm basically just here as a foil for the audience.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, you are here for me to bounce good ideas off of, you know, and to be fair, you do very nicely juxtapose my very salient ideas with your troglodytic ones.
Yeah.
Is that
well,
even a word?
You said it. It must be. So
it must be.
Yeah. Now I will allow you to graciously transition us into visuals.
Okay. So what do you think of the audio on this game?
It was good.
Just if I'm going to screw this up, I'm just going to screw it up the whole episode.
No, that's on brand.
Woo!
So I actually wanted to. There's a good transition in here. I do want to really call out the arcade cabinet and the manual that came with this game, because they didn't know what they were doing at this time in history. Like, they didn't have rules and norms, and a lot of this stuff was not. A lot of the things they ended up throwing against the wall didn't stick, right?
Correct.
The Missile Command arcade cabinet, I feel like, tells you before you even place your quarter in or get close enough to see someone else playing or to see the auto demo playing, you kind of have an idea what you're getting into, right? Side of the cabinet has missiles shooting up into like space. It's very like 70s, 80s sci-fi future. When you get up to the console, the buttons all look like a missile launch, like it's a cartoony simplified version, but it looks like, oh, I'm going to press these buttons and it's going to launch missiles, right? Like, everything is really telling you what to expect before you're given a single instruction. Now, you don't get any of that with the Atari, but they took all of that clarity of purpose and they kind of distilled it down into the manual. And they don't really spend a ton of time on story, but the manual is very clear, like, press these buttons to do this, press this button to do that, jump over here, jump through these hoops. But it's like super clear and approachable, which a lot of game manuals in the early 80s were not. They were absolute tire fires of confusion. So I really appreciate that they took the time to like put beautiful, clear artwork and to have nice, clear instructions, and like it's on brand, but it's not like campy and hammy, right? They're not like, you are Lieutenant Schmargerblarger and you're fighting off the Flargans, right? It's enough window dressing to feel appropriate, but not so much that you're like, just tell me how to play the damn game, please. Right? And I like the idea that they had the foresight, right? They knew we need to communicate this to them somehow, because the game sure as hell isn't going to do it.
Well, and actually, to that point, I do think that the game's visuals are simplistic to the point where it does very, very much so communicate, what the game's all about. There is no what we've lovingly coined as the Home Alone effect in this game, right? There's no foreground, there's no background, which again, like you said, I think that this is kind of like the primordial soup time of games where, just like you said, there's so many, this is pre-Cambrian extinction where life was like, I can make stuff. Look at what I can do with this DNA. Look at all the stuff I can do with this DNA. And then all of a sudden the Earth said, we need to get rid of like 95% of this probably. And
most of these ideas are bad.
So the Cambrian extinction is E.T., the game.
I mean, you're kind of right.
Yeah, that was the Cambrian extinction event where it's like, okay, 95% of this has got to go. And then they were like, okay, but we still got some life remained, and now this is what we're going to do with that.
Yeah. Oh, you know what it is E.T. is like the 6-headed, 3-stomached fish, and then Super Mario Brothers is like a mammal, like fur, milk reproduces like a smaller number of young. They were like, okay, this let's make more things like this. Like going forward, fewer weird fish, more mammals.
What I was picturing was like, this has gone way far afield, but like, all the pre-games were, the cells before the one cell ate the mitochondria and could then build like all of this like complex, more and more complex. Yeah. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is that this game doesn't suffer from a lot of the things that, when you think back to old Atari games, all of the games you're thinking of probably look like this, honestly, because the ones that survived look like this. What games do you think of? You think of Pong, you think of Breakout, you think of games like that, which are basically, it's like there's the stuff you need to interact with and then a black background. And that's it. Whereas if you think of games like E.T., where it's like there's colors everywhere and sometimes you're moving in 3 dimensions and sometimes you're only moving in 2 dimensions or whatever, whatever they did. So the fact that basically there's the stuff you need to do that is in color and then just black background, which means they don't have to render it. They don't have to spend any memory on it. It's just, that's it. I think that was absolutely the right choice and definitely withstood the test of time of don't put stuff there that don't need to be there.
Well, and what they do with color is they start you out with like brown ground, black sky, right? And then the cities, I think, are blue at first, and the missiles, I believe, are red at first. And the explosion, like, so when you shoot your anti-ballistic missile to interrupt the ballistic missiles that are incoming, it's like it flashes through several colors, but it's not like a rainbow filter. It's like 4 or 5 colors, not like all the colors that the Atari could possibly render, right? But then as you go into later and later levels, the way they spice it up is they change the background. So then it gets blue and then it gets green and they change the color of the ground and they change the color of the cities. And what I realized playing through this is, oh, this is the look that modern indie games are trying to copy, right? And a lot of modern indie games do this incredibly well, but you think of a game like Hyper Light Drifter, which is super over the top, like 80s colors, or that like there's like a psycho murder game that's very Grand Theft Auto-esque. Hotline Miami, super crazy 80s colors because it's supposed to take place in the super crazy 80s. But this game, this isn't imitating the 80s. This is the 80s, right? So they're authentically...
There's a group of people that doesn't need to watch Star Wars. And that's the people in Star Wars because they lived them. They lived the Star Wars.
Yeah, that. So like they're authentically employing the things that we now nostalgically think back on fondly from because there was a lot of garbage stuff in the 80s, just like there was a lot of garbage stuff in every decade. But the use of color, even the color combinations that when I try to describe them sound horrible, like, oh, a green background and blue ground with flashing red missiles, like that just sounds awful. But the shades that they chose, the way the flashing happens, the way how clear the lines are, because it's not like they could do smooth gradients, right? So there's like really clear barriers between solid blocky colors. Like I honestly, I think it looked great. Like the resolution on everything is terrible, but you are never ever confused. Those are my cities. These are the bad guy missiles. These are the good guy anti-ballistic missiles. This is the little mushroom cloud explosion. Like when a city gets hit, like everything is so rudimentary, but the use of color really makes it kind of like pop and come alive in a way that, like I said, I think modern indie games often struggle to copy because it had such a distinct look. And it's like at the time they were very much restricted by the hardware, and now the problem is they're not restricted by the hardware. So they're like, oh, well, what if I use this shade of pink, or what about that shade of pink? And then, back in the Atari 2600 days, it's like, we have pink. We can't, we don't have 100 pinks to choose from. So if you want to use pink, I got one for you.
Yeah, here is pink. Well, and also too, I think that, as we said, with the simplicity of the visuals, it would have been so easy to say like, well, it's a black background, right? Because this is happening at night, right? So, you see at night, you see stars. need stars in there, right? Could you imagine what that would have looked like? I mean, it would have been horrendous, right? And I think that this is back during a game where, again, it was the primordial soup, but when Evolution wasn't making things purely for competitive reasons. It was just making stuff for funsies, right? I mean, that's not how any of that works. But, I mean, a lot of games now are like, well, we have to have this feature or this thing because in order to be competitive, we have to have it, right? You have to have footprints in the ground because all the games have footprints in the ground. If we don't put footprints in the ground, then it won't seem real. So the fact that the games of this era weren't beholden to that. They were just, a lot of times like a programmer, two programmers that were like, yeah, let's make this game. And then they made it. They weren't beholden to like an executive committee that needed to turn a profit. They were just making games. I think led to a cleaner series of decisions that were made in service of gameplay. So it's interesting because now when games go astray, it's more so that a game may lose track of what it's trying to do. Here it went astray because they didn't know any better. Now it's like games know better. It's just people who don't know games make bad decisions, because they're involved, because there's so much money involved with it. This was more like, I'm making a bad decision because I don't know what a good one is. So with that in mind, one of the things where, so obviously their capacity, what they had room for is incredibly small. Everything that they animate is purposeful. Did you notice the animation when the city explodes?
That's a mushroom crowd.
Yeah, but that's a very distinct choice. It's not like the city just blows up, right? It's not like it just like disappears. There's a mushroom cloud because it's a nuclear weapon, And so the fact that even though they changed this game to not be humans versus humans, it's Flargars versus Flargo versus it's Glars versus Glears, right? I think that it's interesting and very salient that they kept that because I think that again speaks to the theming of the game is that this is very much so that is a nuclear bomb that is coming to wipe out a city and it's your job to stop it. And it's and we can get into this mechanics, but because you're in an entirely defensive role, there's no, like, okay, well, I'm going to go out now. I'm going to fire a missile or anything like that. It's like, nope, your job is to literally protect these cities because if you don't, in this one, and the entire screen flashes in this one flash of light, that entire city is going to get wiped out and then stays wiped out. So I thought that it was cool that they kept that.
That cements that you're the good guys, right? You're not attacking someone. You're defending your cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are purely on the defensive. But if you think about it, right, like it's very rare, I believe, and from thinking about it in this day and age, that a game puts you entirely on the defensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something you'd really think
God,
of,
even in like Pac-Man and Pong and Breakout, like other super early games, you usually have a way. You either go on the offensive or the whole game is about you being on the offensive.
Right. I mean, like even in Mario, I mean, there's memes made up about the fact that, there was just this typical Koopa kingdom and this horrible person came in murder rampaging everywhere, But yeah, it is most of the time in most video games, you are on the offensive, even in Civilization or Civilization-like games, the 4X games. What do those X's stand for?
It's explore, expand, extract, and extinguish.
Extinguish or exterminate, right? Yeah. So
it is exterminate, but I'm gonna roll with it.
Sweet. But either way, it's that last X that is the most telling, right? So even if you're like, oh, I'm gonna play a peaceful science game, it's like, yeah, but the game's kind of made for you to spread out and kill everything, right? So anyways, all that being said is that I think that, again, to tie it back to visuals, is that they kept the visuals that are needed to drive home the fact of the severity of what it is that you're fighting, which, again, puts a greater imperative of you being on the defensive.
I think it's worth, if you're listening to this somehow and you have never seen Missile Command for the Atari 2600 or in the arcade, because they've remade this game a million times, right? So like it's on mobile phones and it was on the friggin' GameCube, like it's everywhere. So go and look at a screenshot if you can't picture this game in your mind and try to imagine the fact that all of what we're saying about like the gravity of the situation is being communicated by like a handful of dots. Not even a lot of dots, like a few dots.
Mm-hmm.
But it really does. Like when you're playing, the pace of it and everything, like, the missiles are coming down at you and you're trying to, launch your anti-ballistic missiles up, right? So that you've mentioned before with the camera, like, if the camera's looking down, you feel powerful. If it's looking up, you feel weak because it's, it's just our stupid monkey brains. Like, this is that, right? Like, you're down in the city on your planet and missiles are raining down on you. You feel like defenseless, like you're like, oh God, they're coming for us, right? So it's like a handful of dots and some lines. It's a very tiny little bit of that they're actually working with to communicate this, and yet somehow they're still managing it.
It is. It's the Keanu Reeves effect, right?
He's a handful of dots and some lines.
Aren't we all? No, it's the idea of like the reason why Keanu Reeves is successful in franchises like The Matrix is because he is so deadpan. It allows you to project yourself onto him, So, but the idea is that the absence of something gives you the space to project yourself into it. So, this is definitely on so hard on the one side of the uncanny valley, on the before you get to creepy, dead-eyed. What was that Tom Hanks movie? Anyways, that one. Polar Express.
Polar Express.
Yeah, Polar Express. This is way pre Polar Express, right? But I mean, it gives you that space to just kind of be like, no, this is serious, The one negative thing I have to say about the visuals is that strobing effect is unpleasant. For me. Yeah, did not care for it.
I see why someone would find it unpleasant. I enjoyed it a lot. I felt like it wasn't too fast. It wasn't super fast flashing, which does make me, get kind of like, ugh. I liked the color choices that they used for it. I'm actually pretty pro strobing effect in this game.
So yeah, no, I mean, I like the colors. I liked all that. I think that the thing that always, and maybe this is me, being defending people that don't need defending, or can obviously defend themselves, but I always worry, like when I see a strobing effect like that it's kind of like there's a lot of different ways to accomplish what you're trying to do. A strobing effect is a great way to accidentally hurt somebody who has epilepsy, or to suddenly find out that somebody has epilepsy. So, and this is just of an era of games where that wasn't even on anyone's radar. I mean, that wasn't even on the people's radar when Pokemon came out, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, this is really popular and a lot of people are having seizures,
We should have someone look into that.
We should have somebody look into that. Ched, look at this. You see, now Ched's having a seizure. I don't know what's going on.
Everyone I show this to can't tell me what their problem is.
See? It's like that. Oh man, this tastes really bad. You want to try it? No.
So do you have anything else for visuals? Because you've actually set me up for an incredible transition.
No, I'm good. Go for it.
Rock on. So, we didn't talk about the HUD. We're not going to talk about the HUD. It's very simple and effective. So,
yes.
You know how many missiles you have left. You know what your score is.
Yep.
Here's my amazing transition. So when you lose, because, it's an arcade cabinet style game, you lose eventually because the name of the game is Get the High Score. So when you lose, there's a sound effect that is supposed to be like the big one falling. It's like a and then a boom, and then the screen flashes, right? And so I was playing this where somebody else could see me playing, and they said, what just happened? And I was like, oh, I lost. And they were like, no, but like, what was that flashing? And I said that them bombing my planet, like we're all dead now. And
everybody died. You failed.
And that's when I realized that I was like, oh, you could play pretty much this entire game without the sound on, and that's neither here nor there, right? But I like that final you done screwed up thing is they used all the tools they had, which is the visuals and the audio, to communicate what's happening. Because if it was just the flashing and you couldn't hear the audio, right, and there's no accessibility for this, right, there's no subtitles or anything, if it was just the flashing, then you would be like, oh, did the game reset? But because they pair the entire screen flashing with the, like, cartoony, like, kaboom kind of, sound effect, it really drives home like, no, you died. Everyone died. They won, right? Like it's because if it just said like, oh, you lost or you're out of missiles or, no cities remaining, like that would be sort of video gamey. But the fact that it shows you dying and it makes the like, this is the last sound you hear is the bomb falling on, the last remaining stronghold of your civilization. I was like, this is surprisingly like poignant and emotional that you don't just get like the end screen.
Well, and that's the thing is that, and this is actually a little bit back on visuals. I didn't have it in my notes. We're
transitioning. It's okay. It's okay.
It's
a big gray area.
Yeah. Is it doesn't say game over. It says the end. And that's another very, again, distinct choice because, I mean, again, this is like you are the missile commander. You are trying to defend your cities from nuclear annihilation. So when you fail to do so and you lose, it's not the game is over. This is the end, like it is the end of everything, because you failed to defend your target. And again, with a game that's so simplistic and had so little to work with, the fact that they made these very distinct choices, is really fascinating. And actually, not to make it all about this, but it's all about this. So I mean, the city vaporization sound, I thought for the limited tool like sound palette that they had was very well done because it's not. It's kind of like it sounds like something vaporizing, you know? And so it's not like this like big bombastic explosion. It's it's kind of like the, what was it? Christopher, what was his name? The, Lord of the Rings, Saruman.
Christopher
Lee.
Yeah. Christopher Lee.
Yeah. When he's, like, okay, I want you to get stabbed in the back and then for you to go, that's not what people who get stabbed in the back sound like. Oh, okay, Christopher Lee. Don't know what to do with that, But that's the thing is, it's not like oh, we're gonna make this like kind of explosion, and he's like, yeah, it's like that's not what a city being vaporized by a nuclear weapon would sound like. It would sound like this, And it's just kind of like, oh, right. Again, it's not. This isn't like, oh, the B-51s are coming through or the Flargans are going with their spaceships and they're bombing you. It's like, no, there is as Data once put it, it's not all that. As Data so aptly put it in one episode of Star Trek is where he said, like, they will bombard you from space. You will die having never seen the face of your enemy, And so again, like it just like the city vaporizes and then it's gone. And the thing is that you still have to then just very quickly deal with the fact that you're like, okay, that's over. I lost that city, but I can still save 5 of them. And so it's kind of like a great middle point of being not understated, but not overstated either. When I heard that, I was like, that I've got a lot of feelings about this one little noise.
In an era when everything is high pitched beeps and boops and blorps, and because the sound card in the Atari 2600 sucked. Right? The sound card in an arcade cabinet at this time in history sucked. Like they didn't have much to work with. And so being reserved about it and being like, yeah, we could make the missile could hit and we could go like bleep, bleep. So it's really obvious to the player, like, oh, the bleep, bleep means that you lost a city. And it's like, no, we're going to make a city being vaporized noise because that's what's supposed to be happening. And there's going to be a city being vaporized visual because that's what's supposed to be happening. But then you have to like get back to it, right? In war movies, when the grenade goes off and the person has like tinnitus for a minute and it's all that like sound, like the gunfire doesn't stop. You just can't hear it for a second. And then it slowly fades back in, right? That you're the missile commander. Just because off in the distance you can see and hear a city being vaporized doesn't mean there aren't more missiles incoming. Like you got to deal with that. Yeah,
exactly. You've got to just, deal with the loss at a later time. Right now there's more work to be done. There's more people to save. So yeah, I thought that was very, very nicely done. The one downside note that I have for sound is the alien spaceship, whatever.
Oh, I think that's supposed to be a different kind of bomb. So there's missiles, and then I think the little like wah, 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 I think that's supposed to be like a bomb. Like it's not rocket propelled, so it doesn't leave the trail.
Right. Yeah, I didn't care for that. I kind of felt that whole thing could lift out.
That sound effect is very
video gamey.
It's video game. It's very Galaga asteroidsy, you know, Space Invaders, like that the flying saucer kind of noise. To be fair, like in there, I agree with you that noise is a little bit grating, but one, those things are not on screen nearly as much as the missiles are, so that's nice. And two, they used a loud grating sound effect to draw your attention because visually they are tremendously obscured. They don't leave a vapor trail, and sometimes they damn near blend in with whatever color the background is since the colors rotate. So it serves a really important purpose mechanically. I wish they had made it a tiny bit less grating. I'm with you on that, but the fact that it's grating is at least in service of something as opposed to someone just being like, this noise is grating.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's grating on purpose, and they could have just maybe dialed the grating down a little bit.
Right. Or I mean, like, honestly, you know, removed that mechanic, I feel, you know, and unless, oh man, that would be a great segue into mechanics. You got more stuff for audio?
The only other thing I have for audio is this game doesn't have any music.
Nope.
They probably could have attempted to put some music in between the near constant exploding sounds, but they didn't, and I appreciate that. Correct choice.
Yes, agreed. Especially because, again, the theming of the game, I feel like any music that they could have mustered on this hardware would have been antithetical to, I mean, I'm not listening to my iTunes while I'm trying to stop, you know, cities from exploding. Like it's supposed to be somber.
Yeah. And if they had done like futuristic sci-fi war music, right? Because I guarantee you, if you go and download this game like on iOS or on a modern console right now, there's probably futuristic war music, right? And that's not the worst thing, but I actually think the game is better for not having it.
Agreed. So yeah, mechanics. I think that the bomb mechanic kind of lifts out. I feel that that's kind of one where they said, you know, oh, we've got all of these missiles streaming at you all the time. We gotta have some difference in kind, you know, like in Galaga, you know, like you've got the UFO and, you know, in all these different games, you got a different thing that you have to contend with because otherwise you get bored. I don't really think that this game needs that because I think that in the same way that like Tetris doesn't need that, you know. Like Tetris is just bricks. It's bricks all the way down. You know, they don't all of a sudden say like, okay, well, we've done bricks for a while now. Let's just throw some bombs in there. Some of the Tetris games did that, and most of them are worse for it, you know? So I don't think that the game really needs that. I think that it's good in its core. So the noise is awful. It is difficult to see. And I don't really think that it plays into the game's core mechanics or core aesthetics, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just trying to add more challenge. Right.
Yep.
So it's, I'm with you that it probably lifts out for someone who's really good at this game. They probably like that challenge because that separates them from lesser players. Right. If you're trying to prove that you have the high score at the local arcade on Missile Command, being able to deftly get the bombs, which leave no vapor trail, are harder to see and move considerably faster. Right. Like that separates you from the scrubs. So again, like I kind of get it, but I'm a scrub, so I'd probably be okay if that wasn't in there because I'm struggling enough with the missiles. But I always have more respect for a choice that I understand and can empathize with someone who, you know, for a long time I didn't drink coffee or eat cheesecake. But I didn't look down on people who did. I understand what they got out of it, right? Whereas, you know, people who eat like garbage fast food, I'm like, why? Like, go spend an extra 75 cents and get like a slightly better burger or a slightly better sandwich. Like, what are you doing? Right. So I'm with you that the bombs could come out, but I get it. I get why they're there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not world ending, but I think that honestly, and this kind of leads to one of my other notes, is that the missiles changing the rate at which they come at you is a decided skill building, right? So, in the sense that for two reasons. One is that when the missiles first are coming at you, they are moving at rate A, and when 2 or 3 levels later, they're moving at 1.1A and then 1.2A. So you have to. But the thing is that your missiles move at the same speed, right? So that means you now have to lead your target more and more, which that in and of itself is separating because I didn't really notice that fast enough. So it took me a little bit of time before I was like, oh, wait, my missiles are missing, right? Because they're speeding up. I need to lead the target a little bit more. Now a little bit more. So I think that does kind of a good job of separating out the scrubs, right? Especially because then you really have to get good at, because the hitbox isn't small or unfair. It's very good, very reasonable, but it's not infinite, so.
And it fluctuates.
The explosion does. What I'm saying is that the explosion hitting the one little dot. If that explosion
it's fairly visually there's no coyote physics going on to help you out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that being said, is that if you fire a missile and if you fire your missile and they cross each other in the sky and mutually assure destruction, right? Then you kind of have to scramble a bit. So I think that literally I thought it was fascinating that just tweaking the missile speed and not tweaking your missile speed made for a huge skill curve that, again, I thought was modulated well, especially in a game where the point is mechanically to get the high score and to eat quarters. And the purpose is thematically that all you're doing is buying time, and that eventually if in a war of this type, death will come for all of us, and all you can do is buy these people and yourself a little bit more time before the end comes. So it's good on both things to have a distinct skill curve, because otherwise I feel like the message of the horrors of nuclear war and all that sort of stuff would get lost if it was like, yeah, I'm on level 500. I mean, it's no longer I'm buying people precious minutes to say goodbye to their family. I bought them 3 years, because I fired thousands of these missiles.
I don't actually know in the Atari version that we played or in the arcade. I assume the arcade version will just loop endlessly, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll get faster to a point, and then you probably just play on the fastest speed until you lose, right?
Like Tetris.
Yeah. I don't know actually if that's true for the Atari version or not. It's probably the same, but again, Scrub didn't get there, right? So, but it's a score-based game, and this is actually, so we didn't talk about the HUD in visuals, but I have a way to bring it up now in mechanics. This game has a button, one.
Yes.
Right. The Atari joystick.
All you need.
Yeah. The Atari joystick, if you've never seen one, is what the emoji for joystick on your phone looks like. It's a single.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a single vertical shaft with a rubber gasket that you can move in infinity directions, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And a button, one big red button. So you had to hold the joystick with your hand and press the button, or you had to mash it down against the table so that you could steer the joystick and then press the button with your other hand, right? It's an awkward ass controller. If you built these kind of controls into a giant immovable arcade cabinet, that would be a different thing, but you had to hold this weirdness in your hand. It was weird. It was a weird time. I really appreciate that all of the information that's on the screen is all of the information there is, period, right? At the top is a number, and that's your score. As you go up in levels, it shows you the level you're on, but then it goes away almost immediately after that. Underneath where your missiles launch out of, there's literally the missiles stockpiled, they're laying there being ready for you to fire them. And then off to the side are your backup crates of missiles. That's it. It's all there is. And so you really clearly know, okay, I pressed the button and a missile fired, and now the stack of black lines is one shorter. And when I press the button again, now the stack of black missiles is 2 shorter. And when I press the button again, now my missiles are 3 shorter. Oh God, I'm running out of missiles, right? And when my missile hit their missile, the number at the top of the screen went up. And video games are a relatively new concept, but I know I like big numbers, right? there's not a lot going on mechanically in that sense, but you're also never really confused about anything. Like I really think you could hand this to someone without the manual, and if they understand just vaguely that in games you want to score more, right? And they understand that if you have 10 of something and you throw 9 of them away, now you only have 1 left. Like, they could probably work it out, even if they don't really understand what video games are or how they work or what the story within the game is. Like, it's a really simple, straightforward, this is what you're doing, right? One button, what you have your little aiming reticle, and that's it.
Yep. And I think that's something that I actually so I'm a big proponent of Lean and Six Sigma and all that kind of good stuff. I actually use video games as an exemplar of good affordance, because basically, or good visual management, right? Is because I literally walked into an area of the lab the other day, and I said to somebody, well, we could do a better job visually managing this process. The person's like, what are you talking about? It's easy. And I said, like, okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever played Mario? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, cool. Who trained you on how to play that game? And they're like, well, no one. I'm like, right. You just picked up the controller and kind of slowly were able to intuit it. And they're like, yeah, but it's like, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's the thing is it's who trained you to play Missile Command. This isn't Solitaire where somebody had to sit you down and say, no, you can't put this card on this card. Again, it's so clean and clearly understandable of what it is that you are trying to do that it doesn't really require any incredible explanation. You touched on something though that I think is very important, which is that you have limited ammunition, which does fundamentally again change. It is 100% on theme to the aesthetic of nuclear war, and you only have so many defenses but otherwise it would change the way that you play, right? Because why else wouldn't you fire a bajillion anti-missiles into the air? I mean, like you would just be, ABF, always be firing, and that would take away from it, right? Because now you're not a missile commander who is like trying deftly to manage the resources that you have in order to stop the oncoming apocalypse. You're just button masher, like this isn't something that's requiring any cognitive load on you to kind of weigh out like, okay, well, so for example, when a missile is screaming towards a city, right? There were a couple of times where I was like, and again, I made this call like in the split second, but where I was like, I had taken 2 swats at that missile already and I kept missing. And it was so close to the city. I'm like, I could maybe fire one more missile at it and maybe it'll get it, but I don't have infinite ammo, so, and I don't think I can catch that missile before it goes to the city. And I got 5 other missiles that I've got to get my reticle lined up so that way I can actually hit them. Otherwise I would have just fired missiles and forgotten about it. Right. So I let the city go, because that was the call I had to make to save the other 5,
And did you have any weird guilt when there was a missile heading toward a city that had already been destroyed, and you were like, do I let it hit it? What if there's survivors? like I'm for a game, I know there are not survivors in the city, but every single time, because it's like, no, dude, you got to stop all the missiles. And then once you lose a city or more, you get to the point where you're like, is it okay to let those missiles hit the ruined cities? Like, I think it's okay. Why am I concerned about this?
Yeah, and that's just, again, to me shows like just a really fantastically well-crafted game where, it is a game that has a morality system built into it with no right, but there's no renegade or paragon, right? There's no, but there is absolutely a morality system built into it, to where you're just kind of like, okay, well, do you let that city go, or do you try your best to save it? Do you defend your base so that way you can continue to defend the other cities, or it improves your ability to defend the other cities, or do you let your base go and then defend the city instead? There's so many different, and I may be thinking of the original arcade cabinet where you could actually lose the missile bases.
Yeah, in the 2600, I did not experience a missile launch loss. So if you can, it somehow didn't happen to me. But I think in the arcade cabinet you could.
But and that may be what I'm thinking of. But I mean, that's the thing is that the game has a morality system built into it, and to me, I think it's a good one because most games, when you gamify a morality system, you just create a new mechanic for the player to play with, right? So it's not actually testing your moral compass or whether or not you're truly willing to do something noble, which would be sacrificing something that you care about for something for someone else, right? There's another game, and this is slightly tangential, but did you ever play Nier Automata?
No, I think I know where you're going because I know the twist, but I have not gotten around to it yet. It's one of those like I mean to play this games.
Right. And so spoilers, if you haven't played it, I also haven't played it, but again, the basically the twist is at the end, you can't beat the big bad. And so the game says like, would you, like don't worry, stay in there. And then, you fight some more, you still lose. And then a whole bunch of like really supportive messages come up, and then you fight some more, you probably still lose. And then all of a sudden, like all of these other ships come in and save you. And then you win. And then at the end of the game, it says, would you like to leave a message for other people who are fighting this thing? And you're like, yeah, so all of the messages that you got were real messages from real people telling you to stick with it, right? And then it says, would you like to dedicate your airship to the fight? So all of the airships that came and helped you, those were other people's airships. But the thing is that in order to do that, it permanently deletes your save. That is something that you, the human, have to give up, something that is actually valuable to you as a person in order to do something good. That's a morality system, like and I'm not saying that all morality systems have to be this way, but saying like, if you help the wizard, he'll give you good points. It's like, well, I need the good points in order to cast Force Lightning because good Jedi do that, right? No, in order to control people's minds. That's right, because good Jedi control people's minds, right? But that's the thing.
They Force Lightning the mind, not the body.
But that's the thing is that it's just another currency, right? So I mean, it's not actually a morality system. This in an Atari 2600 game has one of the most advanced morality systems that we still struggle to master today, and that's impressive.
One of the things I noticed that I also thought was like shockingly ahead of its time is this game has a live system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally like human lives or alien lives, I guess.
No, it's human lives. Let's get rid of the facade, this charade that it was aliens versus aliens, man. This is 1981. This is the coast of California, and this is Russia launching nukes at the U.S. Continue.
Yeah, no. But it has a diegetic UI. How do you know how many lives you have left? How many lives are left? Literally, how many lives are left? You can see them by looking out of your tower. How many cities have not been destroyed? And this is, I thought this was clever. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But I had a weird, oh man, they really gave me a blank canvas to project my feelings onto moment when, again, I was playing in front of somebody and my last city got destroyed, and they said, oh, how come you didn't lose? And I said, well, you gain back a city if you earn enough points. And so I may finish the level with enough points to earn back a city, which also makes kind of a grating, high-pitched noise. But I was like, so they have to let you finish the level because you might have earned back a city and then you can continue playing. And I did. And I had this kind of flash of like, oh my God, the points aren't arbitrary points. That's like resources my society has amassed to rebuild society. So the reason the game doesn't end when your last city is destroyed is because you're not out of the ability for civilization to go on. When you end with no cities and you don't have enough resource points to erect a new city, then you lose because your society can no longer survive. Like civilization is over, right? The Armageddon has come. And I was like, that's haunting. Like, this is because not only is the live system like a live system, but you can survive beyond that because the thing that you're fighting to protect is not any individual person. You're trying to protect your entire civilization, and your entire civilization goes beyond any individual city. I was like, how is this so heavy?
You're not trying to defend humans. You are trying to defend humanity.
Yes, excellently put.
And so, no, and very, very salient point. I couldn't agree more. I really like the point that you make about, like you said, and I wouldn't have thought of it this way, but it's a diegetic UI. So it's just kind of like, oh, how many lives do you have? 6. Oh, you have 6 lives? No, sorry, 60 million lives represented, quantized in units of 10 million. It's like, it's like, because every single time you lose a city, it's just kind of like, oh, well, that's 1/6 of how many lives I have, and again, it's human lives. So I think the one kind of other, kind of throwaway note that I have, and then the one other point I want to make was, I think it's interesting, as you said, is that the missiles will continue to go after cities that have already exploded. So to me, I translated that into, right, because the thing is, again, this isn't the Blork or Florks or whatever, right? This is a nuclear launch from another country, right? Which means it happened hours ago. These aren't missiles that are actively being fired at targets. These are missiles that were fired 8 hours ago and have been screaming towards their target, and now you're defending against it. Like, you are literally the last line of defense. So I was like, that makes sense to me, that the game isn't smart targeting cities. So so then also too, not all missiles are set to hit cities at all. Some of them will just straight up miss. From what I noticed, is that, like, some of them looked like they weren't on a trajectory to really hit a city at all.
Yeah, I think you're right. Some of them can sort of land in betweenish.
Right.
And because in the Atari version we played, I don't think your anti-ballistic base can be destroyed. Like, you can just sort of ignore those ones. Like, if you line it up and you see, like, oh, it's going to hit me, I can just ignore that and go back to defending the city. So there are some, like, gotchas. It's like, oh, do you need to pay attention to that missile at all?
Right, which I think is, again, important from a game mechanic standpoint, especially when you pair that with the limited amount of ammunition, because it's forcing you to think critically about the missiles that you're fighting. So it's the name of the game isn't destroy all of the missiles. The name of the game is preserve the cities. And so again, like, because if every single missile was going to hit a city, those two things would be the same. So you'd be like, well, it would be easy to lose sight of what it is that you're trying to do. Where it's like, oh, I'm trying to destroy all the missiles. It's like, no, you're not. You're trying to defend the city. So be careful, because if you do just kind of go down that rabbit hole of, I have to destroy all the missiles, you will waste ammunition that you do not need to waste. So you may spend time trying to eradicate a missile that wasn't going to hit a city, and in turn, a missile hit a city. So it forces you to be thinking critically, not just kind of zoned out and just trying to bash the bright lights, which I thought was pretty well done.
Well, and something you're making me speculate on, but I would almost wager money on this, which is, in the later levels, I don't think missiles only move faster. I bet you there are more, which means...
Oh, yeah, there absolutely are.
Yeah, which means, so in the earlier levels, let's say it's a 5-to-1 ratio, right? They're going to fire 10 missiles, but you have 50 anti-ballistic missiles. But in the later levels, they're going to fire 49 missiles, and you have 50 anti-ballistic missiles. So now, not only do you need to be a crack shot, but now you're really thinking, like, do I waste 4 missiles or 4 anti-ballistic missiles, panic trying to defend this one city because I didn't notice that missile was incoming? Or do I reserve them, because otherwise I may end up where there are missiles coming in and I have no ammunition left at all. Right. And then, like, that's, you start to grow. Resources feel like they're becoming constrained, not because you have fewer anti-ballistic missiles, but because the situation has grown more dire.
Absolutely. And then that leads, again, back into, like, the morality system, right? Whereas if you say, like, okay, listen, like, I can't, I've got 3 missiles. Let's just say I got 3 missiles that are all heading towards one city, right? I got to let that city go because I already, I don't have the resources to defend it. Or worse, I do have the resources to defend it, but I know that there's going to be 50 missiles 50. I have 50 ABMs, and there's going to be 49 missiles. So now I've just really improved my ratio by just letting that city go, right? And that entirely sounds like, the military coming in and pulling food away from survivors, saying, we, the military, need this food in order to defend you, right? So now all of a sudden you're making this, again, moral choice to let all of these people die so that way you can do a better job saving the other people. And it's a legitimate decision, and it feels legitimate because you're making it all in this like quick knee jerk split second of time, And again, all of that from whatever, 8 bits.
Yeah. Couple lines and some flashing.
Yep. Can all of a sudden force you into being like a jackbooted thug saying, no, man, I need these resources. Like, I'm defending you. I'm the hero here.
Go hungry, peasant.
Exactly. But yeah, so I thought that that's kind of like I said, a good call. And again, a way to modulate the difficulty curve. So, not only do they, like you said, do they speed up the missiles, but the fact that the defenses, the number of times you can screw up, right? Your failure spectrum becomes way narrower before, not before game over, but before the end.
Yeah. Something I wanted to mention about this game that I don't know if either of us actually have ever brought this up from some of the earlier games we've played on like Nintendo or Game Boy, but I realized playing this and we had to emulate this game, but Atari has released it into the public domain, the original version, so I don't feel bad about that. But no, I don't have an Atari 2600 laying around, unfortunately. But when you play Super Mario Brothers on a Nintendo, you pop it in, it's a cartridge, so it instantly turns on, you're instantly on the start screen, you press start and like you're in the game, right? When you play modern games, the console has to boot up, then there's like the logo, then the company that produced it, then the company that developed it, then Nintendo, right? There's just like a million, and then like the title screen animation. Sometimes you can skip this crap, sometimes you can't.
I think Donkey makes fun of that sometimes, where he'll just like, he'll like put in extra studios and be like, okay, come on. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, sometimes it's not that bad, but there are times where it's like really obnoxious. The Atari makes the Nintendo look slow. Like, there's no title screen, there's no nothing. Like, if your Atari had power and this cartridge was in it, the game was like, are you playing? Press buttons and you will be playing the game. No title screen, no boot up, no nothing, zero crap, no, do you want 1 player or 2 player? That was there. You can actually play this game 2 player on an Atari 2600, but it's all done in hardware. Like, you physically change the way the box is set up to make it happen in hardware. So it's like a little toggle switch, I think. And you had to have a second controller plugged in. But like, I was a little blown away by the fact that I was like, oh, there's no anything except the game. Like, this is like in a lot of sci-fi where it's like, oh, one day I will be a being of pure thought and I'll have no emotions and I'll have no physical body. And it's like, this is a game of pure game. Like, there is nothing but the game.
It has shed its producers and its developers and has become only game.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that, probably came over accidentally from the arcade, right? You just walk up to an arcade cabinet, you put a quarter in and bam, playing the game. And whether or not they made that decision on purpose when they ported it to the Atari, I kind of appreciated that all that, because I played this several shorter play sessions, like instead of, a few longer ones, it was like a bunch of short play sessions. And just every time I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna play some Missile Command. It was just like, oh, I'm playing it already. Like, I thought about playing it and I'm already on like the 3rd level.
It's like, the camera shows you, kind of getting up from the table or, sitting down to the table and you're like, I should probably play some Missile Command. And then like, the person next to you looks over and says, you are playing Missile Command. And then it just, cuts back to you and you're like currently playing it. It's like the Bender of, oh no, she's right behind me, isn't she? No, I'm right in front of you.
But I appreciated that because, I would have liked to have played this on, I would have loved to have played this on arcade cabinet hardware, but the Atari experience ain't bad.
No, not at all. And so that's actually a good segue unless you have anything else.
No. We can definitely talk about how this hold up, which is this hold up good. I say no, not only no nostalgia goggles, but I was surprised by how much I enjoyed playing this. Like this, and I'm going to be honest. Am I going to sit down and play this a little bit every day or every week or even every month? No, I'm not. But I now know with a high level of confidence, with the fairly sophisticated game literacy I have as an adult semi-professional game critic, Missile Command for the Atari 2600 is actually really fun 35 years later. Like,
yes,
that I really thought, because we decided like, we're going to play a game that's like super foundational, right? We didn't want to go full Pong, but we wanted something really early, really simplistic, and to just like, flex our game critique chops against this primordial soup, game. And like, goddamn, like it's fun. Like if this was really legitimately fun, I really legitimately enjoyed playing this. I was like, I probably would have just dumped quarters into this if I had been, the right age when this was popular in arcades. Like this is a good ass game. Like the Atari, and like, maybe screw around with some of the modern versions, but like the Atari 2600 version is in the public domain. Just go emulate the Atari 2600 version. It's really fun.
Yeah, you could go play it right now. For me, absolutely, this game hold up, this game good. For all the reasons you said, one of the reasons why I really wanted to play this as well is, like you said, flex our muscles, see if we can critique this really old game. But to me, I think, and not to get too high up on my soapbox here, but to me, the reason why I think this game is so important is because this, to me, shows that video games are art. Because with so little that this game had to work with, it tells an incredibly strong narrative. And it's like, the problem is that, you need AAA studio money to tell a good story. No, you don't. You need to have all of these different, game mechanics and all this. No, you don't. You can develop an amazing morality system simply by actually forcing the player to make moral choices. You don't have to gamify it to make it into mechanics. You can just have it exist. So I think so not only does the game absolutely hold up, I think it holds up. Not only is it fun to play, but it holds up as an exemplar of what games can be and what they what kind of roles they can play in our society. Because honestly, when I was playing it and a city was lost, or 2 cities, 3 cities, like I've been playing, I did my best. However, their stories are over, and
the curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained.